Hey, it's Soleil, and this is episode 129 of the Orange Pill Investor. And today I want to talk about what stock you need to trade the wheel or covered calls or cash secured puts. And the truth is, even though I made a ton of money on MicroStrategy this week, I don't need MicroStrategy. This strategy was working well before I started trading MSTR. I mean, there's some degenerate stocks back here. Let me just look at my history. So let's look at 5 years of Tilray. I was trading Tilray when I started trading in May of 2020. And so I remember this. Tilray pumped, this is a weed stock, pumped to 20, 30 bucks, and then it's just been a train wreck ever since. But I would trade this. Let's just check my history. So the last trade I had this must have been some poor man's covered calls. Yeah, here we go. So August 2021, I had the 15.5 calls, and I closed these. And then I decided to get out of Tilray, and I went ahead and sold my leaps. I have no idea if I even made money on this trade or not. On these trades, I had gotten to the point where I had gotten away from my original strategy of selling covered calls, and I started selling these poor man's covered calls, and I ended up getting wrecked big time on this. But when I sold straight up covered calls, it's really not failed to produce profits in a bull market and at least reduce some downside in a bear market. So, not saying that this is a get rich quick scheme or it solves all your problems, because when Tesla, if you own shares of Tesla, when it does this, when it's at 400 and it goes to 100, there's no amount of selling covered calls that's going to truly protect you from this. If you hold shares from 400 to 100, what is this? So this was November 2021 all the way down to December 22. So about a year. So if that's 52 weeks and you sold 1% each week on the way down, let's just assume it was a straight line, diagonally down, then you'd have 150 shares when you got here. So in that sense, you would have been protected. Instead of a 75% loss, you'd have 150 shares worth what? 15 grand instead of 100 shares worth 100 grand. And so, yeah, it protected you somewhat. And then, if depending on how sharply this moved up, some of those shares might end up having to get sold off to cover. So, not saying that this is a perfect strategy, and it doesn't solve all your problems. Like, it's mitigating a little bit of downside risk, but you still have some downside risk. But even though MicroStrategy went to 1500 and I had the 1370, 1380, and 1400 strikes, it cost me about 30 grand to it cost me about 30 grand to buy those back. And I ended up selling some shares and selling a leaps to cover that. But my account was up 45%, my main account. was up 45% this week. Now that's because I had a lot of shares on margin. I was heavily margined. And that explains why I absolutely had to take some profits. And so I prefer to take profits anyway, but some people will say you never sell your MicroStrategy, you never sell your Bitcoin. But everyone's situation is different. If you were an absolute just OG mind reader and you called the bottom for Bitcoin when it was 15, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna frickin' mortgage my house, I'm gonna lever up 10 to 1, and I know this is the bottom. Well, when it went to 30 and you can double up and you can alleviate some of that leverage, I think you'd be crazy not to take a double up and get that absolute existential risk off your back. Why would you risk blowing up your account if you had won? Like, you made a really risky bet, you freaking rolled the dice and you won. I wouldn't kick myself like, oh, okay, well, I sold, I levered up, I sold half, I covered my leverage, and now I'm just like everybody else. I think everyone assumes that, like, everybody works a 9-to-5 job and then they live within their means and they save their extra money in Bitcoin, and that's absolutely fine. But some of us are out here levered to the gills, and it absolutely makes sense to take profits and basically take some of that leverage off your shoulders. So I have a lot more buying power this week than I did last week, and even in proportion to my account size. So yes, do I have less shares of MicroStrategy now than I did a week ago? Yes. I would prefer to have more shares of MicroStrategy. However, when you're trading on a margin account, you gotta take your wins, and dry powder is even more important. You definitely want to avoid the dreaded margin call. So, but that brings me back to, I sold off some MicroStrategy, and while that, somewhat discouraging or whatever, but I don't need MicroStrategy. Like, I was trading Mara and Hut and Riot and way back in the day Tilray and Tesla and basically anything that would generate premium. At one point I even was like, you know what, if the 60-40 strategy of stocks to bonds makes sense, I was out here selling covered calls against TLT. Can I even trade TLT in? Yeah. So TLT is the bond market, and I was out here just getting crap. Is bond market trading multiple times a week now? Okay. But let's go to the 24th. So I was out here selling covered calls and getting just, not much premium whatsoever. But I was probably doing 4 minutes covered calls, so it actually was a little bit better ROI than this. But this is like what, like 1/3% of premium and 50 cents in call away value. I mean, this is just terrible. But I was experimenting with a lot of stuff, so I would basically trade anything and anything if it had reasonable premium. And so apparently sometimes even if it has unreasonable premium. But for fun, I decided to start a wheel cycle. So I sold at the money puts in Mara, the 20 strikes, and it's already down to 1945. So it looks like it's well on the way of getting to my first assignment, which would be fine. Let's turn around and sell covered calls in it. So my cost basis at the 20 would be basically 19. So if this stays above 19, then I technically haven't lost any money. My cost basis would be 19 a share. it drops to 18 a share, then I'm down $100, and then I'll sell another covered call and chip away at that. But so selling covered calls and reinvesting the profits and reinvesting the profits and reinvesting the profits, as far as I can tell, works with any stock that doesn't go to zero. So as long as you are trading something that continues to have value, unless you're just the worst stock picker of all time, then selling covered calls with the strategy can work. I guess I got to say not financial advice or whatever. But so even given that, though, if the stock that you want is the stock that's always going up. And so since I think that Bitcoin is going up forever, it can be volatile along the way, but over long periods of time, it's up and to the right for my entire lifetime, as far as I can tell. So the same should be true for MicroStrategy, and MicroStrategy even has some things going for it that Bitcoin doesn't, like eventually MicroStrategy will be included in the SPY. Bitcoin's not going to be included in the SPY. So there are ways that MicroStrategy is going to benefit from the traditional finance market that Bitcoin won't, and MicroStrategy has leveraged Bitcoin. So it's reasonable to argue that however Bitcoin trades, MicroStrategy should trade at some multiple of that. And so I see MicroStrategy as basically a way to just earn a living, really, and buy groceries, take vacations, quit my job, buy more Bitcoin. And right now, the financial tools, as far as I can tell, I'm not aware of the financial tools that I can use to use Bitcoin to make more money. Like, I don't know how I would use Bitcoin to buy more Bitcoin. I just buy Bitcoin and it sits in cold storage, and then it either goes up or down. But I'm buying shares of stock, and then I'm selling options against them to generate more money. And as far as I can tell, the financial tools are not mature yet for Bitcoin to make that happen. If they ever do, and I can still self-custody it and not, risk my Bitcoin getting into someone else's hands, then maybe I would think about something like that. And so I don't need MicroStrategy. I can do this. I can do this with HUT. I could just have whatever 20,000 shares of HUT or something stupid, and this will work just fine. And the reason is this: I've showed it before, and I have altered this strategy somewhat because MicroStrategy is so volatile. I've gotten into buying leaps instead of shares. I still do have like 40 uncovered shares of MicroStrategy, which would not be enough to cover both of my covered calls, I don't think. I'll go over more of that in detail. But if I sell for 1% premium, and let's be clear, 1%, I'm being very conservative, because I sold puts in Mara and got, let's just say $20 a share, 5%. I got 5% ROI. I put up $2,000 in collateral for 100 shares, and I got paid $100. So I'll go over to this column later. But even being conservative, if I sell a covered call or a cash secured put and I get 1%, and that lets me buy one more share of the stock, it's going to take me 50 weeks buying it's going to take me 100 weeks buying one a week to get to 200 shares. Now I got 200 shares, I sell 2 covered calls a week, I buy 2 shares a week, it takes me 50 weeks to get to 300. And on and on and on and on. And this is all true whether I'm trading HUT for $9 a share, Mara for $20 a share, Tesla for $180 a share, or MicroStrategy at $1,500 a share. It makes no difference whatsoever because I'm collecting a percent of the stock's value. And if I collect 1% of any stock's value, I can buy 1 share of that stock, no matter how much it costs. So I don't need MicroStrategy to do this. I was doing it for a long time before MicroStrategy, got on my radar. And it's not overnight. That would take, in order to get to 10,000 shares, which would allow you to buy 100 shares a week, which would allow you to sell 101 covered calls this week, and then 102 the next week, and 103 the next week. I call that reaching critical mass. That would take 11 years. But that's not putting 1 additional cent in. That's just owning 100 shares and trying to get more shares with the shares that you have. Just creating money from money. That's what this strategy is trying to do. Using a valuable asset, 100 shares of stock, to generate money. Basically, someone who wants to speculate that he thinks the price is going to go up more than that number for next week is willing to pay you for the chance that he might be right and he might double up or triple up or 10x his money in a week. So he's willing to roll the dice on that. And every once in a while he'll be right, and and you'll have to sell off some of your precious shares to pay him off. So this is like, and this is even just never getting your shares called away. If you get some shares called away, then you get knocked back a few shares, and then you got to kind of start over on that, whatever that level is. So this is just hypothetical best case, really. But again, this is not even putting any extra money into this account. It's just generating money from money. But if you could continue to get 5 shares a week, like what I just did with Mara, then it only takes 80 weeks to get to 2,000 shares, which you're at critical mass here if you're collecting 5%, because 5% of 2,000 shares is going to be 100 shares a week. And this is when exponential growth is going to start happening. When you're able to buy 100 shares of something, anything, now you're able to basically turn your account into compound interest, exponential returns machine. So it doesn't matter how much the stock costs, whatever you can afford to get into, if the premium is reasonable and you don't pick an absolute loser of a stock, then this strategy in general works out just fine. But as I said, when you're building call away value into your covered call, you still want the stock to go up. So I want MicroStrategy to go up to my strike every time. I think I grabbed the 1800 strikes. Yeah, 1800, 1885. I was able to get almost 1% at 1885, and I got like 1.5, maybe like 1.33% ROI on the 1800 strikes. So that's building in 20% call away value for next week and collecting 1%. And I think I must have smashed the bid or something on this, because I only got paid like, where's the 3800 strike? Yeah, I only got paid 11.5 for this. And maybe it got a little bit more expensive before the close because I sold this at 9:50 in the morning. I mean, I guess, but now it's supposedly worth 15, 16 grand. So I don't know if I was clicking too quick. I turned around and I forgot to sell my covered calls against Riot. That's unfortunate. That won't cost me too much. It's fine. But yeah, strategy doesn't need MicroStrategy, but it helps. It definitely helps. and it's my preferred stock, at least while Bitcoin is pumping. MicroStrategy is my number one top stock, and as far as I can tell, in 10 years, the top two market caps probably be MicroStrategy and Tesla. Once Tesla FSD and robotaxis and 25K cars and humanoid robots, once all that shit gets rolling, and the solar and storage and I don't know how many other things they got going on. But once the market figures Tesla out and MicroStrategy, once it gets admitted to the S&P and a bunch of other super cool things happen, MicroStrategy could be insanely valued as well. So do I prefer to trade MicroStrategy? Yes. If all I can afford is HUT, I would still do this. And MicroStrategy is just a bonus. Like I want the stock that's going to go up the most, because whatever I have uncovered when I'm buying more shares of it, and I'm also able to still collect that premium and get these huge call-away values built in there. Like with HUT, I sold the 10s, so I think I got 1%, and I was only able to build in like 10% call-away on this. So my upside, limited as it is limited to only 10% in HUT, whereas I'm able to collect the same percentage on a premium with MicroStrategy and have 20% potential upside, twice as much. I can capture twice as much upside with MicroStrategy as I can HUT, even keeping the percent premium the same. So this is why I like the strategy. I like it even better using MSTR, but absolutely not required. And I'm going to probably do a more thorough video in the future playing around with options profit calculator. But in order to protect my shares of MicroStrategy, let's just talk about if this were to go to 2,000 again, and I got to cough up 40 grand, 20 grand each for each of these covered calls. Actually, 20 grand on this one, like 12 on this one, so 32 grand. If I got to come up with 32 grand here, these 40 shares uncovered would be fine, because I could sell 40 shares at 2 grand a piece for 80,000. So I actually have 80 grand worth of play here if I'm worried about a 2K move. Now a 2,500 move would cost me 70 grand here and 62 grand here. So that'd be like 140,000 to roll these if I didn't want to lose these shares, 140 grand. And 40 times 2,500 would be about 100,000, right? Yeah, be about 100,000. So this would not cut it. These 40 shares will not protect these 200 shares from a 2,500 move. It will protect against a 2,000 move, but not a 2,500 move. So if you don't want your shares called away, you have to kind of figure out how many uncovered shares of MicroStrategy do I need if I think it'll go to 2K? How many shares do I need if I think it'll go to 25 or 2,500? So I need 140,000 at 2,500. Oh God, well I need like 60, 70 shares. Anyway, whatever the hell it is. Or if you go to optionsprofitcalculator.com, you can check and see, okay, well, how many leaps would I need to buy? And it'll give you a nice colorful graph, and you can look and see, okay, if MicroStrategy is 2 grand next Friday, what would this option be valued? And if it's 2,500 next Friday, what will this option be valued? And at that point, you can decide if it makes more sense to buy shares or to buy leaps. The leaps are probably cheaper, but they can be a little bit more dangerous because value is draining out of these every day. So you need sharp moves up to take place in order to make these valuable. Shares are just shares. They're just the same forever. Leaps you got to keep an eye on. Like these are 180 days out, 150 days out. Yeah, 180 days. So when this gets to 90 days to expiration, I'm unloading these. That's when theta really starts to accelerate and the value is going to start dropping out of this thing quickly. So I can hold this from a year down to 90 days, 180 days down to 90 days. But, you know, absolutely when it gets close to 60, 45 days expiration, that is an option seller's dream. So I do not want to be holding calls that I bought under 90, 60, 45 days to expiration. I really want to unload these things for whatever they're worth. Even if it's a loss, I'll just take that money and reinvest it in another longer expiration where theta is not decaying so quickly. So some combination of shares and leaps are my protection strategy against MicroStrategy pumping to $2,000, $2,500, you know, whatever. It's not completely insuring me because these doubled up from like 5K to 10K, but I had to pay 10K per option. So my gain was about 5K, even though I could sell it for 10. I paid 5, so my net profit was like 5 per option. So did not completely cover me, but I did not have to even sell these 63 shares, 73 shares. But to make Tasty Trade's trading algorithm a little happier so that I just didn't have this super concentration risk of my account, I probably went from like 90% MicroStrategy to 80 or 70. I don't know. I'd have to take a look. But sold off a bunch of MicroStrategy, bought a bunch of Tesla that was still fairly cheap, sold these Mara puts, and bought like 2,000 shares of HUT just to spread the love around and make Tasty Trade's algorithm happy. So I think I'll leave it for there. And, you know, leave me a suggestion in the comments if you'd like me to cover any particular subject. I will be happy to do my best. All right, be good, y'all.